The following episode depicts acts of violence and murder. Listener discretion is advised. It's February 21st, 1994. 27-year-old Helen Chevalier miraculously makes it home after a harrowing night. Helen works the streets as a prostitute to pay for her drug addiction. It's about 7 a.m. when she arrives at her home on Arlington Street in Worcester's Vernon Hill. The night before, she luckily escaped the clutches of a John who refused to let her out of the car and kept pulling her by her hair. 24 hours later, around 9:30 p.m., Helen leaves her home saying she's going out to meet a friend. She would never be seen alive again.
Unsolved Worcester is brought to you by the following sponsors. Follow the crowd through the doors of Donut Homies and say hi to Haley Noel, the donut queen of Worcester's Canal District. This month, the specialty donut shop features special flavors like strawberry shortcake and champagne glaze. Donut Homies is open inside the Worcester Public Market at 160 Green Street every Wednesday through Sunday at 11 a.m. Online ordering with delivery and pickup options is available at donuthomies.com. Follow Donut Homies on Facebook and Instagram for monthly menu drops, specials, and more. Donut Homies, everything sweeter with the homies.
Welcome to Unsolved Worcester. I'm your host, Dan Yeager. In today's episode, we explore the unsolved murder of 27-year-old Helen Chevalier in early 1994. 3 weeks after she left her home to go see a friend, Helen's frozen body is discovered by a young boy behind 34 Beacon Street, only after the spring thaw had melted a snow pile away. Helen's body was wrapped in a blanket, and a trash bag was tied around her head. Unsolved Worcester will take a deep dive every Tuesday and Thursday into the unsolved murders and missing persons cases under investigation by the Worcester Police Department's Detective Unit. We'll be looking to the past to unsolved murders as far back as the early 1950s and 60s. The approach to Unsolved Worcester is this: shine a light on each of these cases, put a life behind each victim's name, provide a timeline of events and important details, and ask questions that still need to be answered. Our goal is to remind residents of the Worcester area, both past and present, that there are dozens of unsolved homicides and missing persons cases that need resolution. We hope we can be the spark needed to solve a case. It's now around 4 p.m. on Saturday, March 12th, 1994, more than 3 weeks since Helen Chevalier was last seen. Looking over the porch railing on the second floor of the 5-story apartment building at 34 Beacon Street, a young boy spotted Helen's frozen body wrapped in a blanket underneath a pile of melting snow in an embankment behind the building. Police believe Helen's body was dumped behind the building. She had been dead for at least a week. Helen was fully clothed. She had a gray sweatshirt, gray pants, and sneakers on. A hearse from Graham Putman and Mahoney Funeral Parlors escorted the body from Beacon Street. Despite telling reporters there was no evidence that Helen was physically assaulted, police would later tell Helen's family that she likely was struck on the head with a heavy object. In the first few days after Helen's body was found behind the 34 Beacon Street, police investigated her death as if it were a homicide. However, in the months following, police told Helen's family that her death was because of a drug overdose. Later in today's show, we will share how and when Helen's death was placed on Worcester's unsolved murder list. Helen Chevalier is buried at Hope Cemetery in Worcester. Her gravestone is marked with the death date of March 12, 1994, the day her body was discovered behind a Beacon Street apartment building. Helen was the mother of 3 children. When she passed, she left her mother, also named Helen, 4 brothers and 2 sisters. Helen was born in Boston and spent the better part of her childhood living in Charlestown in Connecticut before moving to Worcester. She dropped out of school at the age of 16. Her family was very concerned about Helen's problems with drugs. Helen turned to prostitution to support her addiction to crack and cocaine, and it ultimately led to her murder. At the time of her death, Helen shared a 3rd-floor apartment at 78 Arlington Street with her boyfriend, Joel Perrone, and Perrone's brother and his brother's wife. According to a report from the Telegram and Gazette, days after Helen's body was found, Perrone and Helen's family members tried to get Helen to stop prostituting, but she couldn't kick her drug habit. Helen had a history of arrests, including at least 4 arrests for prostitution and drug possession in the year before she was murdered. That same year, in February 1993, John had hit Helen in the eye and then tried running her over with his car outside of the former St. Vincent Hospital, located on Winthrop Street, near her home on Arlington Street. Because of her addiction, in 1991, Helen's 3 children were taken away from her by the Department of Social Services. Nonetheless, Helen's family described her as a loving mother, a good friend, and happy-go-lucky. When Helen went missing in late February, the family rallied together to make hundreds of missing persons flyers with Helen's face on it. According to the Telegram and Gazette, the family grew concerned when Helen didn't show up to pick up her food stamps. The family even hired a private investigator. Helen's nephew told the Telegram and Gazette that Worcester County District Attorney John Conti told the family there was no signs of foul play in her disappearance, so his office wouldn't be able to help. In 1994, the brick building at 34 Beacon Street had a view of Worcester's Canal District to the south and downtown Worcester to the east. But in the early 90s, there truly wasn't much to see. Below the building, where Helen Chevalier's body was discovered wrapped in a blanket and a trash bag, was the parking lot for Worcester Storage Company on Southbridge Street. Today, the lot belongs to Napac Holdings, a distributor of valve and pipe fittings. Back then, from the rear of the building, residents could see the former Peter Pan bus terminal. And still present, the Worcester Fire Department's South Division Firehouse, Providence and Worcester Railroad tracks, and Madison Place Plaza. The famous George's Coney Island is still in view, and now there's a view of Polar Park and its parking garage. The twin marble towers of Union Station at Washington Square, the Printers Building on Portland Street, and the skyline of Grafton and Vernon Hill neighborhoods. The front of the building looks down Sycamore Street toward Main Street. According to the Massachusetts Historical Commission, the apartment building was constructed in 1898 and named the Beacon for its view looking over the former rail yards along Southbridge Street. It was opened by Charles A. King for the specific purpose of giving working-class individuals and their families a nice place to live close to where they worked. The earliest tenants of the building included craftsmen, molders, firemen, barbers, railroad workers, and machine operators. From the late 1980s and early 1990s to early 2010s, however, the building tenants were frequently visitors of Worcester County District Courthouse. A search of the 34 Beacon Street address draws hundreds of results of tenants over the past 3 decades appearing in court for a number of crimes, including assault and battery, firearm possession, armed robbery, strangulation, and multiple drug possession charges. It's unknown if Helen Chevalier knew anyone living in the building in 1994, or if any of the tenants saw her body dumped in the parking lot. Some tenants told police they were surprised that a body had been there without anyone noticing it before the young boy did on March 12, 1994. One resident told the Telegram and Gazette that Helen's body looked like a pile of clothing that had emptied out of a trash bag. In 2010, more than 15 years after Helen Chevalier was killed, the WPD Detective Unit received new information that required another review from the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner. The medical examiner determined Helen's death was a homicide. She was killed by strangulation. She had injuries to her neck, and there was significant cocaine in her system. Like many of the cases we've already explored this season of Unsolved Worcester, at the time of Helen's murder, police didn't have any leads, and there was a complete lack of evidence on her body. According to a report in the Telegram and Gazette, less than 2 months after her daughter's body is found, Helen's mother, Mrs. Chevalier, told police that her daughter stole a beeper from a customer just days before she went missing. Mrs. Chevalier hoped that would provide some clues to her daughter's murder. As we mentioned in episode 6 of this season, a crabapple tree was planted in May 1993 at University Park in Worcester's Main South neighborhood in memory of 5 slain women, including prostitutes Evelyn Cruz and Sonia Blanco. Sonia and Evelyn also worked Worcester streets as prostitutes. They were both strangled to death. Their bodies were dumped from a vehicle and discovered about a mile apart on February 4th, 1993. 1 year later, in May 1994, around the same time Helen's mom was trying to convince police to explore other leads, a second tree was planted and dedicated at University Park. Helen Chevalier's name was memorialized with 2 other victims during the planting of a dogwood tree at the park. Thank you for listening. I'm Dan Yeager. If you enjoyed listening to this episode, please consider clicking the like button for us. And if you subscribe, the next episodes will show up in your feed. Click the bell on the right, and you'll get a notification of when the next episode is ready. If you have any thoughts you'd like to share, please leave them in the comments below. We do read them all and respond to as many as we can. Anyone with information about the murder of Helen Chevalier are asked to contact the Worcester Police Detective Bureau at 508-799-8651. or send an anonymous text to 274-637. Write TIP WPD and your message, or send an anonymous web-based message at worcesterma.gov/police. Come back on Thursday as Season 2 of Unsolved Worcester continues with the unsolved murder of Roland Clarkson in September 1973. Roland was bludgeoned and mutilated with a rock near Salem Square in downtown Worcester. Be sure to visit Unsolved Worcester on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Unsolved Worcester. Listen to all episodes for free at unsolvedworcester.com and podcast streaming platforms including Spotify, iTunes, and more. Special thanks to Worcester Public Library, the Worcester Police Department, the City of Worcester, Ron Scott at New England Sky Picks, and our sponsors for making this possible. The Unsolved Worcester podcast music is provided by Tom LeBelzik of the Worcester Jazz Collective. This episode of Unsolved Worcester is written and produced by Pat Sargent. Drone footage provided by New England Sky Picks. Videography and editing by Colin Turner. Victim images are courtesy of the Worcester Police Department. Sponsorship information announcer, Chandler Walsh. Be sure to check out the video for this episode with exclusive aerial views and more on our Unsolved Worcester YouTube page. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Don't miss another episode. Click the notification button to get alerts when new episodes of Unsolved Worcester drop. This program is supported in part by a grant from the Worcester Arts Council and the National Endowment for the Arts. To find out more about how National Endowment for the Arts grants impact individuals and communities, visit www.arts.gov.